is Lynn Marie Messer. Okay, and she was 52 years old, and she lived in Missouri. Now, her and her family had a 260-acre farm with many buildings and homes on this property, and it was something that had been in the family for like 4 generations, and so it was a big, nice property. And Lynn Messer had a habit of going for a walk when she was stressed, or she needed to think things through, or if she was they were all deeply religious, so anytime she needed to pray, she would find peace and solace in the nature around her. And so she was known to walk a lot. There's sometimes that she would walk, several miles, just trying to find peace on something. And so when she went missing on July 8th, 2014, everyone thought she had just walked off. But things started not adding up right away. People started noticing that there was a problem. So I'm going to stop my screen share, and then we're going to we'll continue on. Now, like I said, if you are watching, make sure you comment, because like I said, I see a number, but I don't see a name. So make sure and comment so I can give you a shout out, and that way we can go from there. So, okay, so Lynn Messer, she went missing around 4 a.m. According to the public story, she went missing around 4 a.m. on July 8th, 2014. So this is about 6 years and 4 months ago now. Now, what was so unusual about this was her husband, Kerry, said that a thunderstorm woke him up about 4 o'clock in the morning, and he rolled over and his wife was not in the bed. Now, he said this wasn't unusual because she had some insomnia problems, and usually she would get up and sew or do something, or she would go for a walk. And so he didn't think too much about it, except for he realized that it was raining and there was a thunderstorm. And it had been raining and drizzling, according to local weather stats. It had been raining and just real drizzly for several hours before this. So when it started thundering, he thought it was odd that she would be walking that time of night, and so he went to look for her. He thought maybe she was in the house. She had hip problems, so maybe she fell down. He was looking around the house and tried to find her. Well, strangely enough, Lynn had some, I believe it was bursitis in her hips, and she had just got some news that there was nothing else really that they could do for her, and that she was going to just have to deal with this. There was nothing else they could do. And so that was bad enough, but then she had also had something wrong with her foot. I believe she had a broken toe or something along those lines, but she had a medical grade walking boot that she had to wear if she was going any distance whatsoever. So when they start looking around the house, her keys, her purse, everything that she would need was still in the house, including that walking boot. And so that's where this case gets a little bit, unusual, because one, why would this woman leave in the middle of a rainstorm, right, in a thunderstorm? Why would this woman leave at 4 a.m. Without the walking boot she required to go anywhere farther than the bathroom, So is very unusual. Now, there had been cases in previous months and years where she had taken the wrong medicine and wound up really confused, and so they thought maybe this is what happened. Now, I have to give you a little insight of how the layout of this property works. Now, there are several different barns and things because they had cattle and all sorts of things. But there was also another home about half a mile or so away from the main house. Now, that house was owned and lived in by their son, Abram. They had 2 sons, Abram and shoot, I have to look it up. I'm sorry. They had 2 sons. Well, one of their sons, Abram, his wife, and his children all lived in this house. Now, they were, they weren't supposed to be caretakers of the house. They weren't paying rent or anything. This was where they lived because the grandfather had given them that property, that part of the property, before. So this is where in a little bit you're going to find out that that is a very touchy situation right there. So let me get down and find the brother's name. So like I said, if you're watching, please give me a shout out so I know you're there. Okay, let's see. It's Abram and I can't believe I can't remember her other son's name. Abram is the one that is we're going to be talking a lot about. So it's Abram and another son. I can't remember. I can't believe I forgot his name. Okay, so basically what happens, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:15 or so, and all of a sudden, Abram and his wife hear Cricket says, I remember her case now that you mentioned the boot. Yeah. Abram and his wife are woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, just after 4 o'clock. They hear some pounding on the door. They hear his father, Kerry, screaming, Abram, and so they come down in a panic, thinking, the house is on fire or whatever, and so they're in a panic, and so Abram comes down, he unbolts the door, he comes in, and he says, Dad, what's going on? This is, not usual. And so he's trying to figure out what's going on. His dad turns to him and points to the four-wheeler in his front yard, and he says, when did you take that from the house? And he's like, did you bring that? When did you bring this up? And Abram's a little confused. He's like, well, what's why are you banging on my door at 4 o'clock in the morning asking me about the four-wheeler? And he tells his dad that he brought it up the night before. And Kerry walks to the end of the driveway, turns around and tells his son, I don't know where your mom is, and gets in his truck and drives off. And so Abram thinks, well, I'm sure mom's wandering around. Maybe she was in there's several buildings on the property. Maybe she's over there. Maybe she couldn't sleep, and he's like, I'm sure they'll find her, he'll find her soon. Well, he doesn't find her soon. And it's all very unusual. And by the time the next morning at 6:30, 6:45, the other son comes in. He lives about half an hour away, but they all still work on this farm together. And so the other son comes in, and his dad is in a state of panic, says he's been looking for his mom, his wife, since 4 o'clock in the morning, can't find her. So his son starts looking around. And so I've gotten several people message me, so let's hang on for just a second and I will give you a shout out. Sharon Parker, she says, hello, I'm from Waveland, Indiana. Hello, Sharon. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Rebecca says, I'm watching you right now, but I can't message you on YouTube. Thank you for joining me, girl. All right, so we've got a few more people giving shout outs. Okay, so let's go from there. All right, so where things start really getting unusual in this case is right away, people are wondering if maybe she wandered off at 4 o'clock in the morning because she messed up her meds. And she had, I believe someone said she had 3 separate occasions within the previous year where she had either taken too much of one medicine or took the wrong medicine. She had even had a car accident where she had accidentally taken sleeping pills instead of pain pills, and I guess she wrecked her car. And so this was something that was common, and they figured that she's wandered off in the rain in this medicated state, and she doesn't know where she is. And so Kerry takes off again to look for his wife, and his son his oldest son looks through the property, all the buildings. He can't find his mother, so he realizes in a panic, Dad's been looking since 4. I've looked for another hour. I can't find him. We need help, and he calls the police. Well, when Carrie gets back, he gets upset at his son for calling the police, and his son can't understand why. And now it's to the point where the sons are turning against the father because he's refusing. He won't admit that he did this. And so, it could have been one of those things where he was in a panic, he wasn't thinking straight, or it could mean more. We don't know. And that's where this case ends. It's been 6 years, almost 6.5 years now, and the case is literally built on how you interpret it. And this is what's so frustrating about this case, because you can interpret it one way or you can interpret it another. Now, by the time the police got there, Carrie Messer said that he had told his oldest son, he told him that his mother had left a note, and he wouldn't let him see the note. And he said that it was just everything. It was very final, whatever that means. Okay, so this Abram, who had been woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, gets over there, and he's like, "Where's Mom?" And he's like, "I haven't found him." And the brother had called the police, and he's like, "No, why didn't you tell me about this note at 4 o'clock this morning? I mean, that makes it all different. She just didn't wander off, and in another room of the house, she left a note." Well, there comes a lot of conspiracy around that note a little bit later. And so what turns out to be perhaps a telling moment is when the police arrive. Now, the police look through the house, and they're the ones that notice all of her belongings are still there. She's not missing anything, including the boot that she required to walk. So if her mindset was, "I'm going to go out and walk because I'm stressed and I can't sleep," then she would have taken her walking boot if she was in her right mind. But we do know she took several medications. I apologize if you hear my little Bichon back there making noise. My dog thinks he needs to be with Mom all the time. So, so back to the story. The problem is if she had taken the wrong medication, would she have thought clearly enough to, to actually take her boot, or did she forget it, and because she couldn't think straight? So that was the thought process. Well, the police start asking the standard questions, and they start asking, "Was your wife depressed?" And to his son and daughter-in-law's amazement, Carrie gets defensive and says, "No, never." And then he's like, "Has she ever been on antidepressants?" And again, he's really adamant and defensive and says, "No, never." And the son, Abram, and his wife are sitting there, and they're like, what's going on? Why is he lying? Mom's been on antidepressants for a decade, and she's been on all kinds of medication because she has the deterioration in her hips and she has all of these problems. And so that makes you wonder, why in the world would he say that? Hang on just one moment. I apologize. My Bichon, he has to be with Mommy. I posted a picture of him in a fedora earlier today, so you guys could see him, because he's always being a little ornery when I'm on camera. So, but anyways, so the son and his wife are standing there, and they live on the property. They have 4 children, and those children are at Grandpa and Grandma's house all the time. Lynn loved her grandkids, loved keeping her grandkids, and so they didn't live with them, but they were pretty close. And so it was common knowledge within the family that she took antidepressants. So why was he so adamant and so defensive about this? Well, they've made a big stink about that, and they say it was because he was hiding something. And I'm going to drop the story right here, and I'm going to go off on a tangent because let me tell you who Carrie Messer was. Now, Carrie Messer was a lobbyist. He was a lobbyist in Jeff City for the Missouri Family Network. Now, he was a lobbyist that pushed pro-life, family, homeschool, Christian, very conservative principles. And he was very extremely religious, at least externally. We don't know how it was at the house, but his upbringing would make it to where I'm gonna tell you. Okay, I'm trying to be circumspect here without saying what I really like to say. Let me pause you one more time. I'm gonna throw my dog out. There we go. Now, I was a mean mommy. I threw him out. So here's the thing with Carrie Messer. They were extremely religious and very connected to their community. They were very connected to the homeschool community and through their church. And they ran this Missouri Family Network organization. And that was their entire existence. So, raised in a religious family myself, I have to tell you that depression and anxiety are looked down on because you are supposed to turn to God to solve those things. Well, we also know that sometimes you have to take a medication because there's a chemical imbalance, but some religions teach that if you claim that verbally, that you're accepting it. And some religions claim that if you have something like that, you must not be right with God. And I don't know how their religion was laid out, but I know that that is common in a lot of some religions. And I'm not going to get off on a theological discussion, but that may have been the cause why he was so adamantly trying to hide the fact that his wife was on antidepressants. So it could have been something to do with his religion. I don't know. He denies that he's done this, but there were several witnesses that said he did. So does that mean anything? I don't know. It could be a half-crazed man losing his mind because his wife's gone. I don't know. So I'm just giving you all this information, and then I'm going to leave it to you to decide what you think happened. And then I hope you will share this, because if we can get it out and somebody sees it and they realize they have some information, maybe we can get it to law enforcement and get this case solved. So that's the whole purpose of what I do, is to try to generate leads and try to generate publicity around cases that need publicity. And this one definitely does. Okay, so that was the first thing that seemed really strange. And then the daughter-in-law spoke up and said, well, Abram, did you tell him about what happened in the barn? And again, Carrie Messer flies off the handle and he says, what are you talking about? That didn't happen. And the officer tells Abram, you need to tell me what's going on. And so I guess 6 months prior to this, Lynn had gotten so depressed that she had contemplated suicide, and she had taken a gun to the barn. And then she didn't follow through with it. And then Carrie finally admitted and said, well, I didn't know you knew about that. And so it's all kinds of strangeness right there at the very first. Well, once the police hear this, that she's been on medication, there's a high history of her taking the wrong medication and getting confused, and that she did have some suicidal tendencies, and that or she had at least at one time, and then she did take antidepressants. They started their search under the auspice, we need to find her because maybe she was going to hurt herself, or maybe she's out there on medication and can't figure out where she's at and hurt herself. And so it really stepped up the investigation real quick. They're like, we got to get out there. And so they did, but something very peculiar happened before the police got there. Okay. And Abram wouldn't know the meaning of it until later. And it would actually take the police to kind of open his eyes to see what this meant, or what it could possibly mean, because nobody's been charged in this case, so all of this is alleged. Just before the police got there, see, the older brother was there, and he was the one that called the police. Carrie came back, found out that his older son called the police. He got upset. Okay. Well, just a little bit later, that's when the younger son, Abram, comes up, and Abram is like, where's mom? And Carrie says, I can't find him. Your brother has called the police. And so Abram says the first thing that anybody would say, what can I do to help? Well, instead of get on this four-wheeler, go out to that pasture, see if you can find some. No, he says something very weird. He says, I want you to move the cattle from this field to that field. Now, anybody that knows anything about farming, you do want to rotate your cattle to, between different fields, to allow the grass and things to grow. I mean, you rotate your cows, so they constantly have something, some food, and that's normal. But why was that something that he had his son do before the police got there? Don't know. Abram went and did what he was told. And later the cops asked him, why would he do that? And he's like, you don't understand. He said, in my house, everything was very authoritarian. And if dad told us to do something, we were expected to do it. It didn't matter if he was 30-something years old living in a house half a mile away. You did what you were told, and that's how it worked. And so he didn't even think about it. Well, later when the police come and search, they don't find anything. The search dogs do pick up a scent, but they lose it right there in that field where the cattle are. And the police questioned the son extensively for 9 hours, going over and over and over. Why did you do this? What? And he just kept, oh, Dad told me to. And so they went back to Carrie, and Carrie said, well, Lynn had reminded me last night that they were overdue. And so that was the end of that. Why were the cows moved? It seems pretty obvious that the cows were moved to destroy evidence. But of course, that's all alleged. We can't say that for definite. It comes back down to your interpretation of what this could mean. Okay, so everything's starting to look really weird, very suspicious. They have hundreds of volunteers. They have law enforcement out there. They have scent dogs. They walk that entire property in a grid pattern a few times. Eventually, by the time all of the searches were over, they had combed over 5,000 acres. And the family's, farm was 260. So that was a pretty big place. And there was lots of woods and places that she could have been. So they really took their time, and they even used GPS tracking units to monitor where their people and the dogs were walking, so they could map it out and make sure they didn't miss anything. So, I mean, they really went through that place to the best of their ability. And she wasn't found. And so this went on for a little over 2 years. And by the time her body was eventually found on November 1st, 2016. By then, there was a lot of turmoil in the family between the father and the son. The reason being is the son realized after he had been interrogated for 9 hours, he really felt that his dad had kind of half set him up, because his dad had told him to move the cows. And he, without thinking, did what he was told. And in doing so, he feels like that was a strategic move to distract the dogs and to keep the dogs from where she was found. Because 2 years later, they find her. They find her skeletal remains in that area where those cows were. And so all of these things are happening, and if that wasn't enough to make you wonder what in the world happened to this poor 52-year-old woman, here comes the next thing. There was another woman, and she had been a friend of the family for 20 years. And she had a farm that wasn't too far away. And at some points in time, she even allowed the Messers to leave their cattle on her place. So it was one of those deals. Well, she had never been married, and she lived with her parents and took care of her elderly parents until they passed away. And then she inherited this large farm. Well, since she allowed the Messers to leave their cattle on her property certain parts of the year, Carrie Messer would go over there and handle the handyman chores, different fix-up things that she couldn't do around the farm. Well, over time, Abram starts getting suspicious because he doesn't really appreciate the way his father acts around this person when his mom's not there. And he had noticed it for quite a while before his mother went missing, but now that his mother was missing, it made it even worse. And although they denied it and everything went crazy over that, the police did verify that Carrie had been seeing his neighbor within at least 8 weeks of his wife's disappearance. So this makes you wonder what's going on. Now, the son believes that this has been going on for a long time, and he starts going back through things that had happened over the last 6 months since that incident in the barn. And he believes that this was an affair, and his mother found out about it, and that's the reason why, for all of the mental chaos and torment over the last few months that she suffered. Now, we're going to go back and take one theory. One theory was that she had tried to hurt herself. Now, one thing that I will tell you about Lynn Messer, she loved children, and she worshiped. Her religion was her daily life. It wasn't just something she did on Sundays or her Sabbath day. She was religious to her core. She had a relationship with her creator. She was, it was all her existence. It wasn't just, a routine that she did. And so anytime something came up at the church that she could do, she would do it. And she had been teaching a children's Bible study. It was a vacation Bible school type thing during the summer. And she had just gone to the store to buy more art and craft supplies so she could teach the Bible class for the next evening. And then there were several little things that she had done to prepare for the next day. She had called her daughter-in-law about 11:30 that night before they went to bed around midnight, and asked if she wanted to come and bring the kids and go swimming. So she had plans for the next day, and so it would be kind of odd for her to choose that time to harm herself. If she was in her right mind, because then you can also go back and say, well, if she had messed up her medication, then maybe she wasn't thinking straight. It all goes back to the way you interpret the facts. And the problem is when they found her body, it was skeletal remains, and so they haven't determined the cause of death. On her death certificate, it still says pending investigation, cause unknown at this time. And so they haven't found a cause of death. And they finally did release the body back to the family for burial. Now, because of all of the chaos and all of the media publicity and the son accusing the father and all of this chaos, the church where the public memorial service was going to be held had to be canceled because there was so many complaints and things, because people felt like, you had people on both sides. You said, how could a son betray his father and accuse his father? And then you had the other side that said, how could the father kill his wife? And so you had this big mass of chaos, and they ended up having to cancel that. And so they went in, and him and his new girlfriend buried his wife in a private ceremony. And as far as if you go on the Facebook, it looks like they didn't even invite the sons. So if that wasn't bad enough, within a few months, they are married. He marries his girlfriend. Now, here's where I want to go off on a little bit of a tangent. And let me go and check, see if anybody's commented real quick. And Amanda Mashburn says hello. Hello, thank you for watching. I apologize, my little issues with my dog. I had to take care of him real quick. So here's where I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. Now, when you have a case, you've got to take your facts and build a case from the facts. You've got to separate your emotions from it, and you've got to separate your theories. Now, as a writer, I am a creative thinker, so it would be real easy to create this big, gigantic conspiracy theory around this case. But you can't do that. When you're writing, or you're trying to investigate something, you have to let the facts lead you, not your imagination or your emotions. So I go back to all of this, and I go back to, and I've met this man in person, and they were married when I seen them. He doesn't try to hide publicly. He's still out there publicly. So I met him at a missing persons event. So here's the thing. I know the denomination and religion that they claimed to be a part of. It's not quite the same as mine, but I kind of know the details of how it's structured and how is it laid out. So this is where I get upset. They're so worried about keeping this perfect family front, that everything has to be perfect. There's no problems. Nobody has depression. Nobody has anxiety. Nobody has to take medication. Everything's perfect here. This is the front that they have to have. Okay. And yet his wife is not declared dead. Okay. His wife is missing. Okay. And yet he steps outside of his religion and goes and starts having this affair with this woman. Okay. Now he says that they weren't intimate, but the police say they believe they were. And the family believes they were. And so here's my thing. Whether they were or not is irrelevant. You go back to the letter of what they believe in their religion. They're not supposed to have a girlfriend, even if you are just holding hands and having them around all the. You're not supposed to have a girlfriend while you're married. Okay? So right there, that crumbles that perfect little family illusion. And so I want to know why it's so important to have that perfect front. If you have a problem, we're all human. We all have problems. Why not admit that your wife's on anxiety pills? Why don't you admit the fact that she had suicidal thoughts at one time? It doesn't mean that she's not a Christian because she's overwhelmed with something and thinks something and then doesn't follow through with it. It has no bearing on his religion or how it, you know, sometimes you get into this thought of, well, that don't look good, you know, and I'm like, what is it? Was it going to tarnish a reputation for this woman to admit that she had anxiety and depression? Was it, you know, why? You know, why was it such a shame? You know, that's what one of the things that bothers me. And the next thing is, if that was such a shame, why isn't it not a shame to have a girlfriend 2 months after your wife goes missing and she's not even declared dead yet and you haven't found her remains for another 2 years? Why is it okay to have a girlfriend? So it's a shame for her to be anxious and depressed, but it's not a shame for him to have a girlfriend. And so I'm like, get off your high horse, people. Get off your high horse and get back to the facts. The facts are, this woman has had a history. She has medication. She has messed up that medication in the past. Okay, so there is a possibility that leaves open the window that this woman took the wrong medication. She couldn't sleep. She went out for a walk in the rain. She wasn't quite together because of this medication mix-up. She forgot her boot. She got out there. She got hurt, and she couldn't make it back to the house. Okay, that is a legitimate theory. But then that theory kind of gets holes punched in it when you start thinking, well, yeah, that could have been, but she was found less than a mile from her house in the field where the cows were. So was it just a coincidence that her husband decided to move the cows the next morning and then the dogs couldn't find her? I don't know. And so, see, that's what's so strange about this case. Now, we're going to jump back all the way back to the letter. Now, this is a letter that Carey has not released publicly. He released the first line, and then he makes an excuse, and every time he's asked in an interview, I've heard a different excuse. So I don't know what the reason is. Maybe the police told him not to. I don't know. But he's released the first line. Now, the children have seen the letter. At least Abram has. And he says it's very strange. He said it was as if it was written at different times, because the first part of it was written in a small fine pen. The second part was written in a Sharpie marker. And then the third part was written in that small Sharpie pen. And then investigators have noticed that she usually wrote in a very swirly cursive handwriting, and this was more block. And so could that have been because she was in an altered mental state from her medication mix-up? Or could it have been that it was somebody trying to write like her? To this day, law enforcement hasn't said one way or another. They aren't 100% sure that that whole letter was written by Lynn. So here's the thing. We've got a 52-year-old woman who has had these issues. Well, if you look on the Facebook, there's two different Facebook pages. One is run by Carey Messer and one is run by the Sun. And both of them, Carey Messer on his Facebook pages, all loving poetry about his wife and bemoaning and missing his wife. And I'm like, did you post this just before you went out with your girlfriend? So how much of that is legit and how much of it is a show for public? I don't know. But then the Sun comes out and he's more bold and he says right out he wishes his dad would tell the truth, let him know what's going on. And then he said his son believes his dad knows more than he's saying. And because of all this and because of him being vocal about it, Carey ended up fired him from the Missouri Family Network. So Abram didn't have a job anymore. And then kicked him out of the house that they were living in. Because technically the way it was supposed to be done and deeded and everything legally, it was supposed to be in Abram's name. But things were done to manipulate the situation and Carey's name was still on the property. So now the son has accused the dad of knowing more than he's saying, and accusing his dad of having an affair before his wife went missing. And in turn, the dad has fired the son and kicked his son and daughter-in-law and 4 grandkids out. And so they had to try to go find another place to live and try to find a new job and all of this. So it has been one gigantic, huge mess. And so there's so much more details I can go over, but we're getting close to the hour, and I want to make sure that hi Claudia, I'm glad you made it on. So I want to make sure you guys check out this case. It was on ID channel on their show Disappeared. It was on that, and I think it was season 8, I believe. So you can watch that and get more details. But I just wanted you guys to be aware of this case. And then if you happen to be watching this case and you have some little bit of information, even if it's just something tiny and you don't think it's significant, a lot of times law enforcement just needs that one piece of the puzzle to solve it. And, you know, I look at it from both ways. If the son is right and the father is wrong, or if the father is right and the son is wrong, you know, it could be devastating either way, you know, because that has torn the family apart. And if the father is innocent, then it's torn the family apart for no reason. If he's guilty, then he needs to be brought to justice. You know, if someone else is guilty, he needs to be brought to justice. If something happened to her and this was a horrible, horrible accident, I pray that the family could heal. But nothing can happen until this case is solved and we know what happened to Lynn Messer. So if you have any information, I'm going to tell you where to call. And after I edit this video and get it up on YouTube, you'll have the phone number and you can see it on the screen. But I'm just going to tell you on camera now, you need to call the St. Genevieve County Sheriff's Office in Missouri. The area code is 573-883-5820. 573-883-5820. If you have any information whatsoever, you could be the key that solves this cold case. You could be the key that reunites a family if it has been torn apart and it shouldn't be. You could be the key to solve this case and give some family a little bit of peace knowing what happened to their mother. So if you have any information, like I said, call the St. Genevieve County Sheriff, 573-883-5820, and share this video, because you never know, somebody you know might know something about this case. So make sure you share it, and let's get this case out there, and let's get some justice for this mother who died July 8th of 2014, and no one knows why. So let's share this, and together we can make a difference. And I will see you guys next Tuesday night.